Slowly, thank you so much for tuning into my channel again this week. I really appreciate you guys coming back every week to watch my videos. I've really enjoyed shooting these videos every week for the last few months. I think I've learned a lot about being in front of a camera, and I've really enjoyed just sharing I guess my plant knowledge and collection with you guys. But if you guys are ever curious about any of my plant collection, any of, the things that I do to care for my plants, or just anything at all that you guys are curious about or want to know more about, leave it in the comments. That way I kind of have an idea of what you guys would be interested in seeing more of in the future. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume you really just want me to ramble on and on about Hoyas and Haroids. But for today, I wanted to accomplish two things. I want to talk about, it is the beginning, almost the beginning of spring in Florida, or we're at least preparing for spring. Everything is starting to wake up, and there's a lot of preparation that goes along with that. And then the second thing that I kind of want to go over is just I want to show you how I've managed to organize my porch to be able to grow so many plants in this little tiny space. I think a lot of us are attempting to grow a plant collection in either an apartment or a house with a very tiny porch, something along those lines, and maybe the stuff that, or the systems that I have found over the years that have helped me grow so many of them in this little tiny compacted space might be able to help you grow your collection in your space. So I think a lot of what I am going to cover today, specifically as it relates to what I am starting to do now that we're getting close to spring, has a lot to do with the fact that I grow my plants in Zone 10A, which is St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm very, very lucky that we really rarely have like a chill here in St. Pete. I only had to really take care of covering my plants and protecting my plants from the winter over Christmas break, and that was the only time I really had to deal with the cold when it comes to my plants. And thankfully I am in an enclosed porch, so there isn't that fear, or not as much of like a frost factor. So I'm really lucky to be able to grow my plants in this space, but I realize that not a lot of you are. So before, take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, because if in your area you're still subject to a frost, like definitely listen to your weather person, and don't start to prepare for spring until the day of your last frost, which I know, like up in Tallahassee, I believe the day of the last frost is like March 15. So again, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Definitely don't apply it verbatim to your area if you're not living in St. Pete, Florida. We all grow our plants in different areas, different environments. We have different routines. I hope you find this helpful, but always think about where you're growing your plants, and how to adapt what I am saying and my methodology to your space, your plants, your environment, because again, we don't grow our plants in the same exact space. So with that being said, I know you guys are aware because of my previous videos that I have quite a collection of roses and hibiscus and stuff like that on the front of the apartment. And so I think the most like labor intensive part of February for me is the front of the apartment and those plants, because for example, roses need to be pruned in February, at least in Zone 10A, so that when spring rolls around, there's a lot of new growth and they're set up for success. So what I started doing already this week is I started giving them slow release fertilizer. I use knockout rose on my roses, and then I use an azalea slow release fertilizer on my hibiscus. So I already did that a couple days ago, and that's not like a fertilizer that goes in the water, it's a pellet that goes on the soil. So I already added that to the topsoil of those plants out front, and then later this week I will start pruning my roses, and hopefully that'll set them up well for spring, and I'll get a lot of blooms in the spring. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm also going to work on pruning my hibiscus, but I'm trying to wait until at least after my birthday, which is Valentine's Day. I'm trying to wait at least until after that to prune my hibiscus, because they are more susceptible to cold. So just in case we get like a small cold front around my birthday, I really don't want that to damage the hibiscus. So I'm going to wait to prune the hibiscus until mid-February, maybe late February. But that's out front, and that might not apply to the rest of you. As it relates to my Hoya collection, I have not yet started fertilizing them. I don't plan on fertilizing my Hoya collection again until probably the first week of March. That is my goal. That's also when I start repotting anything that needs to be repotted. But what I am focusing on right now is I really want to, before March 1st comes around, I really want to have at least 2 flat mite treatments done on my Hoyas, hopefully 2 or 3. Back in November, I probably went through what all of us did in the Hoya community, which is realizing that we probably all have flat mites on our Hoyas, and I had a slight like freak out and I just immediately went and sprayed 90% of my collection with sulfur. Which ended up just not working out for me. I'm sure it works out for some people, and I'm sure it's the best choice for a lot of you. It's just not the best choice for me. First of all, it smelled really terrible. My Hoyas looked absolutely terrible. It was a nightmare to remove that sulfur dust from my Hoyas and then from the shelving that the Hoyas are on. Then once you spray with sulfur, you're not able to spray pretty much anything else on top of the sulfur, at least I think it was like 8 weeks, because you may burn the Hoyas, or you may burn the leaf. In addition to that, from what I read, the sulfur treatment does not really get rid of the flat mite eggs. There's a whole lot of research out there. I strongly suggest you guys read the Stemma journal article that came out on flat mites, and there's a few other resources that I'll link in the description. Like the University of Florida has a whole article on flat mites, because flat mites have been around for a long time. We're just now, I guess, waking up to the fact that they also affect Hoyas. And you know, I tried the whole looking at my Hoyas through a microscope to see if I was able to see the flat mites. I couldn't figure out how to work the microscope, but what I am seeing is I am seeing some signs of flat mites on some of the Hoyas, but not on most of them. I mean, like, I want to say 85% of my Hoyas look very happy. They're actively growing, they're blooming, they're doing great. But there are a handful of them that when I look at them, and now knowing what the signs of flat mites are, I definitely see some signs, you know, like the discoloration on the bottom of the leaves. I'm definitely noticing some of that on my older Hoyas. So what I decided to do is to use a product that, 2 products actually, that I have used in the past. The first one is horticultural oil. It's one of the things that's suggested in a lot of the articles I've been reading, and I'm using the Bonide All Seasons horticultural oil. It's linked in my Amazon storefront thing, and then I'm using it in conjunction with something called abamectin, which is a very, very strong, very potent insecticide and miticide. And I only used abamectin once before. I had a really, really bad spider mite infestation out front, where my hibiscus were, and I was really hesitant to use it because of, you know, the bees. I really didn't want to harm the bees, but what I was doing is I was spraying like every 5 days to try to get rid of these spider mites, and it just was not working, and I tried so hard for weeks. Actually, it was months to get rid of these spider mites that were, you know, killing my plant collection. And it was not working. So eventually I had to treat with the horticultural oil and the abamectin. I treated once and the spider mites never came back. So I think the key with the combination of the horticultural oil and the abamectin is that abamectin, you only use a 1/4 teaspoon of abamectin per gallon of water, and then I added 3 tablespoons of the horticultural oil to that gallon of water. And so what's happening is the abamectin is being so essentially, the horticulture... So what I was trying to say before I was rudely interrupted by my camera battery is that the reason I'm using horticultural oil and abamectin together is that the horticultural oil makes it so that the abamectin basically sticks to the leaf. So during the life cycle of the flat mite, when a flat mite like wakes up or hatches or whatever, and it walks on the leaf, essentially anywhere it touches on the leaf, there will theoretically be not only horticultural oil but abamectin, and it'll also help when I hose down my my Hoya, since I do water them with a hose most often. It'll make it so that the abamectin doesn't just like roll off the leaves every single time I water my Hoyas. Abamectin is quite expensive. I think it's like $80 for the bottle, but honestly, you use a 1/4 teaspoon of it per gallon of water that you're using. So in order for me to spray this entire porch, I probably used, I think it was about 8 gallons of water. So really, what are you using? You're using 2 teaspoons of the entire bottle of abamectin for me to spray this entire porch. I've only done 1 treatment, but I'm definitely happier with at least the look of the Hoyas currently than I was after I sprayed them with the sulfur. One of the things that happened as a result of me using the sulfur, and I only sprayed 1 treatment, but 1 treatment in the entire porch. What happened as a result is I ended up having to throw away my pump sprayer because the powdery sulfur ended up like just destroying the inside of the pump sprayer. I ended up having to get a new pump sprayer. The Hoyas looked terrible and everything just looked dusty and ugly. I also have a lot of lizards that live out here in the porch, and I noticed, I felt so bad after this, I noticed that I stopped seeing them. So I didn't find any dead lizards, so I don't think I killed the lizards, thankfully, but I think the lizards just kind of got scared of being here because of the sulfur. And I love seeing the lizards when I come out to the porch, so that certainly did make me happy. But now when I look at the Hoyas, I don't know if you can tell, but they look shiny, and that's because of the horticultural oil. The horticultural oil is staying on the leaf, and it's making the leaves look extra shiny. I also sprayed it on my aroids, and they just look glossy. They'll feel sticky because there is horticultural oil on them, but hopefully if I repeat this treatment, at least I'm gonna try to do it like every other week for about 2 months, hopefully, because I know the life cycle on a flat mite is way longer than a life cycle on a regular spider mite. So I'm just going to try to repeat the treatment like every other week for the entire porch, and hopefully that'll get rid of the problem. I'm also being very conscious, since I do sell Hoyas every once in a while at my local plant sales. I'm treating every single propagation that I cut, so that when I do take plants to the plant sales, they have already been treated for flat mites. I don't want to spread a pest problem, even if I'm not aware I have it. I'm very OCD. I'm not just very OCD, I do have OCD. So once I'm aware of a specific problem, my brain just like won't stop until I resolve that problem. And this is essentially what it's been focusing on. It's been very hyper focused on this whole flat mite problem for at least a couple weeks. So I'm gonna get a handle on it, and hopefully I'll do so before it comes time to start fertilizing, because if I try to do both the treatment every other week and then fertilizing a couple times a month, I just know I'm gonna get very overwhelmed, and that kind of defeats the purpose of growing Hoyas and growing plants and having a plant collection. It's not meant to stress you out, it's meant to make you happy. So I'm going to try to get a handle on the flat mite problem. Hopefully as a side effect of trying to get a handle on that, I'll eradicate any other pests like thrips or anything like that that might be running wild out here in Florida. But yeah, so that is my plan with my porch plants for the next, I want to say, couple of months. Focus on flat mites for the next 2 months, and then beginning of March I'll start fertilizing. I'll share more about my fertilizing routine as we get closer to spring, so that you guys can follow along with that, and hopefully it'll render some good results this year, because I really want to focus on trying to get my Hoyas to bloom. I want to have all the Hoya blooms this year. But yeah, so with that, now I think I'm just gonna kind of share the systems that I have kind of developed here in the porch to be able to grow as many plants as I have out here. Okay, so now that I've shared with you what my plan is for the next few weeks as in regards to my porch, I just want to share with you how I have managed to fit so many plants in this porch. So when this porch started out, when we first moved in, we moved in here about 3 years ago. Actually 3.5 years ago. I had plants. I had, I want to say I had probably 40 or 50 plants that I brought with me when we first moved here. And at that point I thought I had a lot of plants. And I want to say half of the plants we had were out here in the porch, but you could walk around. We had a table, we had chairs, we had a bicycle out here. There was so much room in this porch, but slowly but surely, as a result of I think just being locked inside during COVID, like most of us, I started collecting more and more plants. So I think one of the good things that I did from the very beginning when I started collecting plants is I didn't just start buying random shelving, like mismatched shelving. One of the things, well, first of all, because I have OCD, everything needs to match or everything needs to be cohesive. So one of the things I did is I just went to Home Depot and I bought these wire shelves. I have 3 different sizes of them. And so they are the best. They have grown with me over the years, and I think one of the reasons I like them so much is because you're able to move the shelving around. So I think what I've done for a lot of them is I actually removed one of the shelves that it came with, because what I want is I want to be able to grow the Hoyas with their trellis on the shelf, and so I want to leave enough space between the shelving to allow for the trellis to go in there. So anytime I've set up one of the shelves out here in the porch, I've always measured it with the trellis to make sure that before I set up the shelf I have enough room in between them to put my Hoyas with trellises on them. I think the key to being able to grow so many out here in the porch is that I want to say at least once a month I come out here and I trellis some Hoyas, and the ones that have already been trellised have a tendency to try to grow under the shelves and try to get through and attach to other Hoyas, and I kind of rein that in at least on a monthly basis, and I think that's how I've been able to grow so many here, because I really keep them organized. I use 3 different size trellises depending on the type of Hoya and depending on the shelving that it's in. Some of them are on copper wire that I bought at the hardware store and I bent myself, and that's more for the thin leaf Hoyas that don't require that thick bamboo support and really just don't need that tall trellis to begin with. Then I have an extra tall trellis that I use for my long leaf Hoyas, and then I have one that's a little bit wider that I use for the medium sized leaf Hoyas. But for the most part, I always just put them on a trellis, unless I know that a specific Hoya, for example, like an imbricata, doesn't want to grow on a trellis. It wants to grow on a piece of wood and attach to something, because it's a shingling Hoya. One of the cool things that these shelves from Home Depot have allowed me to do, essentially over time, I've been able to grow with them. So when I started collecting plants out here in the porch, I had a lot of succulents and cactus and more aroids and stuff like that. And because the shelving can be moved around, it's allowed me to grow with them, and it's allowed the shelves to kind of adapt to the environment that I'm trying to create. As I started collecting more Hoyas, though, it quickly became clear that because they were so top heavy, I needed to create some sort of system to prevent them from falling over to the floor and then falling all over each other. So I did 2 things to try to prevent that from happening, which was, trust me, it was happening a lot. The first thing that I did, that was my phone. Sorry guys. The first thing that I did is I got these liners. They're plastic, like acrylic liners that I got for each of the shelves, and you can get them in all kinds of different sizes, and you can also get a roll that allows you to cut it to the size that you need it. But I got these specifically in the size of my shelves, and what it has allowed me to do is to just kind of place the Hoyas directly on the shelf, and they don't fall over because of the spacing between the wiring. So that to me was a life changer, because it helped stabilize the plant on the shelf a lot more. I didn't have to play around with the exact placement of each pot to stabilize it. I was able to just place the Hoya and then forget about it. The second thing that I found really has helped me be able to grow these Hoyas out here on these shelves is actually using fishing line on the shelves. There's two reasons I love them. A, they work, and B, you don't even notice it's there. So I don't know if you can see on the video, I'll do a second video and actually zoom in closer, but right here there's actually a fishing line that's holding the pots in place. So if there's a strong wind or anything like that, the pot won't fall over. They're also very top heavy, so what I did is on the shelves, that the levels that are wider, that have Hoyas on trellises, I did a fishing line on top, so right here, so the Hoya won't fall over, and then I did one on the bottom as well. So I just wanted to give you a close-up example, rather than just continuing to ramble on without actually showing you. This is what I mean by fishing line wire. I have it doubled up, so there's two of them. They're really thin, they're see-through, and what I've done is I tied them to each side. I think I did like 5 or 6 knots on each side, and I did one here and then one down here. So it's exactly where the pots are. That way it's actually supporting the plant or preventing the plant from falling over. Like if there was a wind, it wouldn't fall there, and it would also help it stabilize down here. And the best part is you really can't tell it's there. Like when you come out here in the porch, unless I point it out, you really don't know it's there. So it's definitely been one of my favorite I don't know, inventions. And here's a close-up of the liners that I use for the shelving. This one is 24 inches wide, and that's because that's the size of this specific shelf. But if you come over to the shelf that is on this side, I have a different liner that is way wider. It's also a different color just because that's the color it came in for that size. But whatever works, there's so many out there that you could use. And I definitely recommend getting them if you use this type of shelving. I highly recommend this shelving. They're super durable. They adapt to your environment as you grow, and honestly, they're just convenient. I think one of the other things that I learned very quickly is when you have limited space, it's very important that you use up all of your vertical space. So get as close to the ceiling as you can with your shelving, and then be very smart with the way that you use the space that you have created. So for example, the sun exposure in this porch is very specific. As you can see, it's about, right now it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can see the type of sun that these Hoyas are getting. So I was very specific in how I arranged the Hoyas as I watched the sun. So for example, because the Hoyas on the floor or lower to the ground are all on trellises, what I did is I specifically put the trellis Hoyas lower to the ground because that way the sun would reach the back. If I had put those trellis Hoyas on the top, it doesn't get as much sun back here, so the fact that they're so tall would mean that the Hoyas in the back wouldn't get as much sun. So I specifically and on purpose made the smaller space, I guess, shelf on the top, and then the wider ones in the bottom. That way I would ensure that the Hoyas got as much sun as possible. Again, this is pretty, I would say, high indirect sun. At no point during the day are they getting direct sun, but they are getting a lot of indirect sun. As it gets, I think, like closer to 4 in the afternoon, the Hoyas on the top will get a lot more sun, and that's because the sun lowers a little bit, and then it'll come from this direction. So yeah, they're certainly happy over here. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. Hopefully you guys will come back and check out my YouTube channel next week, and I'll cover something extra cool for you guys. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it'll be some Hoya stuff. Maybe it'll be roses. Maybe it'll be desert roses. Who knows? But I'll see you next week. Bye! Bye.